Hey, UMAR, another soft target, another mass abduction, and we are back to the usual search and rescue, negotiations, and of course anxiety amongst the parents and relatives of the abductees. What do you think?
Yeah, indeed it's unfortunate, but it wasn't unexpected. I have followed incidents around Niger State because I have a bias for Niger State, being from Niger State. And I can tell you what happened at Kagara could easily be traced to an indicator which happened some months ago at a place called Tunga Maji in Abuja. A set of bandits actually raided that town and were plundering foodstuff and supplies from homes and shops, after which they abducted a number of females. When these bands of criminals behave like that, it means they are preparing to camp. They are preparing to set up base somewhere, and they need food supplies, and they also need people to cook their foods and meet their other needs as are informed by nature's offices. That's where the women or the females become useful. And then when that happened, from my own place, I saw a possibility that Kogi, Niger, and to some extent Nasarawa may just be attractive places from which they can sit and from there probably harass the Federal Capital Territory. So I did a lot to reach out to my governor. I got across to him, and at that point he said they were on top of it. Well, here we are. We have a situation where we have our children in the hands of these unscrupulous elements. And is it as bad a situation as it looks? Yes and no. There are indeed windows of opportunity. There are indeed weaknesses these bandits have shown openly that can be exploited to ensure that we discourage, if not totally eliminate, their inclination to take after school children. At the moment, there is a lot of air-ground liaison from our armed forces, the Air Force, the Army, the police force too. I have been on Kagara all through the night. I was there virtually. I can actually zoom in on that school, I can zoom in on that town and see much from a virtual perspective. And looking at what is happening at that particular spot right now, it's a beehive of security activity, backed by also local efforts. The vigilantes are working. I also have it on good hand that the group, a set of them, has been spotted by aerial surveillance. And as at the last time I checked, coordinated efforts are being made to see how they can actually be ensieged. And having ensieged them, we see how we can extricate these children. The news that some may have escaped is not unlikely, because from what I know, as at 0200 this morning, the aerial surveillance and the search parties, as informed by vigilantes, local security agencies, has constrained their ability to move. Constraining their ability to move also affects their ability to control the crowd they have. And because they are now actually having to look out for themselves, the children, and law enforcement, their hold may be loose on their captives, and that may have informed such escapes.
Aga school abduction could have been nipped in the bud only if security indicators and intelligence gathering were utilized and deployed. What do you make of this?
Indeed, we have always harped on the viability of indicators. Nothing just happens out of chance. If you know what to look for, you will actually be able to either preempt, protect, or prevent, as the case may be. So there were indicators. Just as I told you, for me, Tungamaji was an indicator. It was an indicator that something big is about to happen within those neighboring areas. Talking about intelligence, I have always said one thing about intelligence. The best intelligence you can have will come to no use if the end user is not intelligent. So intelligence itself is everywhere. It's right here in this studio. It's everywhere. It's to us as we are to it. It's like the ether that informs our existence or the atmosphere. But then, if you do not have what it takes to join the dots, you wouldn't see anything even if you were sitting right on top of intelligence. So basically, intelligence acquisition and what you can call law enforcement liaison with the local populace is also a function of having very intelligent mindsets in place. Just like the senior officer said, someone who actually wouldn't ordinarily need more than a handful of kuli decides to buy a bag. If there were an operative in that market and he's lethargic or complacent or outright unintelligent, that wouldn't make any meaning to him. Throughout last night, I was sitting virtually over Kankara on a global surveillance app, and I saw that very proximate to that school, about 1,116 meters, precisely 130 meters from that school, there is a T-junction that actually goes straight to a mountain range that is a gateway to a lot of what I want to call wilderness or Sahel savanna vegetation, quite a wide span. That's the closest leeway to that school, and I have this strong inclination to believe that for those men to have melted out of sight, even where Kagara town is a built-up area, that would have been their closest leeway. So you discover that for me, I started crossing and dotting my I's and T's. That's being intelligent. I also know, for example, that the average distance a human being can walk in an hour is 5 kilometers per hour. And if you have hostages and stragglers and hangers on, probably you do 3.5 kilometers per hour. So XYZ hours after the incident multiplied by a factor of 3 hours, how many kilometers radius I need to draw around the school. That's intelligence, but you have to be intelligent. You have to think outside the box, probably even a bit curious and mischievous to operate properly within the intelligence scenario. So intelligence abounds, it all abounds, but then the end user must actually know what to look for, how to look for it, and even when you find it, what to make of it.
UMAR, let's probably fast forward on securing soft targets in Nigeria. Some persons have argued that part of what we are seeing now in terms of the frequency of abduction and the audacity of the kidnappers or bandits will arise from the fact that ransom is being demanded and that ransom is also being paid. And so there's the argument, if there is any kidnap incident, do not pay any ransom. What are your thoughts on this against the backdrop that in other jurisdictions that are fairly more sophisticated, when they say no ransom payment, they also have the capacity and capability of ring-fencing the kidnappers or abductors and ultimately putting them out of business? Are we so enabled? And can we also drive the whole idea of saying no ransom payment?
Cannot. And the reason is simple. Whenever we have our children in their hands, we really cannot negotiate from a position of strength. You know, we can't. It's like having your hand in a lion's mouth and then you want to issue threats. He'll just bite. So you are better off massaging his mane or something to get him to gradually release it. But having said that, let me just add to this hardening of soft targets, particularly safer schools, before I say what our law enforcement agencies and the government can do so we don't find ourselves in the first place losing children only to begin to wonder whether we should pay ransom or not. First, for soft school, for safer schools, I recall in 2018 in Lagos here, the Lekki-Ekpe axis where I stay, schools around this place took the heat. Children were being taken from schools, probably because the Ekpe axis was closer to the creeks. And the Lagos state government responded quickly. From my consults, we were able to contribute our own little bit to private schools who were interested. And that was when I came up with the Safer Schools Security Threat Awareness Module. It's a module that has 3 compartments. One compartment for the children, as the senior officer said, another compartment for the parents, and the third compartment for the teachers. Each module actually each of the 3 modules talks to the same situation, but from a different perspective, that is parent, student, and teacher perspectives. And at the end of the day, we brought them all together and even did 2 private schools in Abuja. Now, having done that, we were able to increase that security awareness quotient of the teacher, the parent, and the student, which made the schools a little bit less attractive to prospective kidnappers. Why did they become less attractive? What we were able to put into these 3 recipients through the 3 modules started bringing out questions, cognitive questions, that impacted on what you could call crime protection through environmental design, just like the senior officer spoke about crime protection through resilience. The environmental design of the school, the protocols in the school, the way of doing things in the schools we impacted changed tremendously. STAM 1, 2, and 3, as I call it, are still very much available for people who are interested. We've tried to reach public schools, but that's a different kettle of fish because the bureaucracy and protocols are many. You have to go through this office, that civil service office, and what have you. We're still on it. Now, talking about our government, if we really want to make our schools a bit more difficult for these bandits to access, then what I have spoken about Safer Schools Security Threat Awareness Modules keys in. But even then, we must take over no man's land. No man's land is what I want to call the fringes and the wilderness where they camp. Taking over no man's land, fast-track approach and long-term approach. Fast-track approach is we must begin to consider shadow and sting operations. Shadow and sting operations cannot spread across the country, but they can put the fear of occupying no man's land in these people. The templates, the methodology for doing that is also something that is available. I have worked on it personally as a hobby and ready to share. The next thing is Nigeria needs to begin to look at reenacting the National Guard. Our armed forces are doing their metal best, yes, but their metal best is not enough because Nigeria has a footprint of some 923,000 square kilometers. If you spread the entire armed forces and police across this place, they wouldn't actually spread evenly and adequately. So we need another multiplier, a force multiplier. This force multiplier could come in form of a National Guard. And the National Guard can key into that vacuum that is causing the agitations for state police and what have you. The National Guard can be accessed by all governors, but does not report to any governor. Today you cannot access the armed forces as a governor. But with the National Guard, as you saw in the United States recently, when things started to happen, the governor of that area, he called out the National Guard. So basically what we are going to be seeing is going to be twofold. To harden our schools, we must first and foremost be able to impact the awareness levels of our students, our teachers, and the parents. Having done that, you're going to see them naturally begin to ask those questions that will prompt even the education ministries and all the public sector or public office holders who are in relevant positions to begin to do things because there is demand. Today we see complacency and lethargy in the discrepant appearance of our schools because there is no pressure of demand on those who are vested with the responsibilities to see that these things are done. So with security threat awareness modules for safer schools, you will see parents, students, and teachers begin to ask questions that will tend to call the attention of regulators to those areas, and those who do not meet expectations will definitely be called out or actually kicked out, as the case may be. So there is prospect, there is opportunity, there is also what I want to call challenge. What we see these bandits doing is just a pointer to our weaknesses, to those windows that they tend to exploit to get at us, and, you know, as the senior officer said, get so much money for very little effort. That indeed is where I feel the real solution, fast-track, low-hanging fruit is at the moment, particularly for my beloved state and Kagara community.